Life was perfect for 15-year-old Lily until the day she noticed a small patch of purple skin on her wrist. At first, she thought it was just a bruise from playing volleyball. She rubbed it with her thumb, expecting it to fade like any other mark. But this one was different. It didn't hurt, and it wasn't going away. Within 2 weeks, another patch appeared on her shoulder, then another on her neck. Each morning, Lily would stand in front of her bathroom mirror, searching for new spots like a treasure hunter looking for buried gold. Except these treasures made her heart sink every time she found them. Her parents, Robert and Linda, noticed their daughter spending longer in the bathroom each morning. They heard the hairdryer running for 30 minutes straight and saw her wearing long sleeves even when the temperature hit 90 degrees. Something was wrong, but Lily kept brushing off their questions with a quick, "I'm fine," before rushing out the door. The purple patches were spreading faster now. What started as coin-sized marks were growing into larger areas that looked like someone had spilled grape juice on her skin, and it had permanently stained. Lily began wearing makeup. To school. Thick foundation that felt heavy and looked unnatural under the fluorescent lights. Her friends started asking questions she didn't know how to answer. One afternoon, while helping her mom fold laundry, Linda caught sight of the discoloration on Lily's arm when her sleeve rolled up. The gasp that escaped her mother's lips made Lily's stomach drop. She watched her mom's face cycle through confusion, worry, and barely controlled panic in the span of 3 seconds. "Honey, how long have you had this?" Linda asked, her voice trying to stay calm but cracking slightly at the edges. Lily pulled her sleeve down quickly. "It's nothing, Mom. Just some weird skin thing. It'll probably go away." But Linda was already reaching for her phone to call their family doctor. 3 days later, they sat in Dr. Peterson's office, waiting for answers that would change everything. The doctor examined Lily's skin under a magnifying lamp, his face growing more serious with each purple patch he discovered. He asked questions about their water supply, their home's history, and whether anyone else in the family had similar symptoms. Robert mentioned they had been using well water for 15 years, ever since they moved to their dream house in the countryside. "I'm going to run some tests," Dr. Peterson said, "but I suspect this might be a condition called argyria. It happens when silver particles build up in the body over time." The word sounded foreign and scary rolling off the doctor's tongue. Lily watched her parents exchange worried glances across the examination room. She felt like she was watching a movie about someone else's life, not sitting in a medical office discussing her own body. 2 weeks of waiting felt like 2 years. Lily tried to act normal at school, but normal was becoming impossible. The purple areas were now covering nearly half of her face, and no amount of makeup could hide them completely. She started sitting in the back row of every class, keeping her head down, praying teachers wouldn't call on her. Her best friend, Jessica, finally cornered her after chemistry class. "Lily, what's happening to your skin? Are you sick? You've been acting weird for weeks." Lily felt tears building behind her eyes. "I don't know yet. We're waiting for test results." Jessica's expression softened. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together, okay?" But Lily wasn't sure anything could be figured out. The purple was spreading like spilled paint on canvas, and she felt powerless to stop it. When Dr. Peterson called with the test results, the whole family gathered around the kitchen table. The diagnosis was exactly what he had suspected: argyria, caused by silver particles that had been leaching into their well water from old mining operations that happened decades before they ever moved to the area. "The good news," Dr. Peterson explained over the phone, "is that it's not dangerous to her health. The bad news is that the discoloration is permanent. There's no cure, and it won't fade over time." Lily felt the world tilt sideways. Permanent. The word echoed in her head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. She looked at her parents, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. Her father's hands were shaking as he set down the phone. "It's not your fault," Dr. Peterson had said about the well water. "You had no way of knowing. But fault didn't matter now. What mattered was that Lily's reflection in the mirror would never look the same again. The girl with normal skin was gone forever, replaced by someone she didn't recognize and didn't know how to be. That night, Lily lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her parents' muffled conversation through the walls. She heard words like specialist and treatment options and support groups. She heard her mother crying softly, and her father's voice trying to comfort her with promises that everything would be okay. But Lily knew everything would not be okay. Tomorrow, she would have to go to school looking different. She would have. To face the stares, the whispers, the questions she still didn't know how to answer, she would have to learn how to live in a body that felt like it belonged to someone else. The girl who had once planned to run for student council president, who had dreamed of becoming a teacher, who had imagined walking down the aisle in a white dress someday, was disappearing as surely as if she were turning invisible. In her place was emerging someone she had never expected to become. A person the world would see as different, unusual, something to stare at and whisper about. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lily made a decision that would shape the next several years of her life. If the world was going to see her as different, then she would make sure they saw as little of her as possible. She would become a master of hiding, of blending into backgrounds, of being present without being seen. She had no idea that this decision, born from fear and shame, would nearly cost her everything that made life worth living. By her senior year, Lily had become an expert at disappearing in plain sight. She knew exactly which bathroom stalls had broken locks so she could avoid the mirrors. She had memorized every back hallway in school and could navigate from class to class without walking through the main corridors where groups of students gathered between periods. Her morning routine had turned into a 2-hour production. First came the makeup, layers upon layers of foundation that never quite matched her natural skin tone. Then the clothes, always long sleeves, always high necklines, even when the weather report promised another scorching day. She kept a cardigan in her locker for emergencies, just in case a teacher asked her to roll up her sleeves for an art project or science experiment. The girl who used to raise her hand first in every class now sat in the back corner, hood up when teachers allowed. Always choosing the desk closest to the wall. She had perfected the art of looking busy, head down, pen moving across paper even when she had already finished the assignment 10 minutes ago. Lunchtime was the hardest part of every day. The cafeteria felt like a battlefield where she was the only soldier without armor. All those tables, all those faces, all those conversations that seemed to stop when she walked by. So Lily found refuge in the library, claiming the same corner table every day, surrounded by thick textbooks that created a fortress around her sandwich and apple. Mrs. Rodriguez, the librarian, had stopped asking if she needed help finding anything. Instead, she would simply nod when Lily arrived, sometimes leaving interesting books on her table, never making a big deal about it. It was the kind of quiet kindness that Lily appreciated more than anyone knew. Her grades were better than ever, which surprised everyone, including herself. When you spend every free moment hiding in the library, studying becomes your default activity. History, chemistry, literature, mathematics, it all became easier when you had nothing else to do. Her teachers praised her academic improvement, not realizing it came at the cost of everything else that made high school memorable. Jessica had tried to maintain their friendship for months after the diagnosis. She would text Lily about weekend plans, invite her to movies, ask if she wanted to study together. But every invitation felt like a spotlight Lily couldn't bear to stand under. She started responding with excuses, then delayed responses, then eventually stopped responding altogether. The hardest moment came when Jessica confronted her directly after English class. "Lily, I miss my best friend. I don't care what your skin looks like. You're still you." But Lily couldn't explain that she didn't feel like herself anymore. How do you tell someone that the person they used to know had disappeared along with her normal skin? Instead, she mumbled something about being busy and walked away, knowing she was burning a bridge she might never be able to rebuild. Her parents watched helplessly as their outgoing daughter became a ghost in their own house. Family dinners became quiet affairs, where Lily pushed food around her plate while staring at her lap. They tried everything they could think of. Her mother found support groups online. Her father researched experimental treatments. They even suggested family counseling. "Honey, there are other people who understand what you're going through," her mother said one evening, showing her a website for teens with visible differences. Lily glanced at the screen for exactly 3 seconds before shaking her head. "I don't want to talk about it." The truth was, she had looked at those websites late at night when her parents were sleeping. She had read stories of other people with conditions like hers, people who seemed to have figured out how to live normal lives, but their confidence felt impossible to her, like they possessed some secret strength she had never been born with. School events became torture. Pep rallies meant packed bleachers where hiding was impossible. School dances were automatically out of the question. Even graduation practice made her stomach churn at the thought of walking across a stage while hundreds of people watched. Her guidance counselor, Mr. Thompson, called her into his office during spring semester to discuss college applications. Her grades qualified her for several good schools, including the education program she had once dreamed of joining. "You mentioned wanting to be a teacher," he said, reviewing her file. "Have you given any more thought to that?" Lily almost laughed at the absurdity of it. How could she stand in front of a classroom full of students when she couldn't even walk through her high school hallways without feeling like everyone was staring? How could she teach children when she spent every day trying to become invisible? "I'm thinking about something more behind the scenes," she told him. "Maybe computer work or something." She filled out applications for programs that would let her work alone, in offices with cubicles and minimal human interaction. It wasn't what she had once dreamed of, but dreams belonged to the old Lily, the one with normal skin and normal confidence. The worst part wasn't the stares from strangers, though those were hard enough. It was the way her own reflection had become her enemy. Every mirror felt like an accusation. Every window that showed her reflection was a reminder of what she had lost. She developed elaborate routines to avoid seeing herself, brushing her teeth while looking down, changing clothes in the dark, keeping her bedroom mirror covered with a towel. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, she would wonder, what would have happened if they had tested their well water sooner? Would she be planning prom outfits instead of hiding clothes? Would she be excited about graduation instead of dreading it? Would she still have friends who called just to chat about nothing important? But wondering about different outcomes only made the present feel harder to bear. So Lily did what she had become best at. She buried those thoughts deep down, pulled her hood up a little higher, and prepared for another day of being invisible in a world that felt too bright and too full of people who looked nothing like her. What she didn't know was that all this practice at hiding was preparing her for something she never expected. Soon, she would discover that sometimes the most important connections happen when you least expect them, in the most ordinary places, with people who see you clearly even when you can't see yourself. 3 years had passed since graduation, and Lily had perfected her invisible life. She worked the night shift at a small office downtown, entering data from medical records into computer systems. The job was perfect for her, rows of empty cubicles, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and just her fingers clicking away on the keyboard until sunrise. Her supervisor barely saw her except for the monthly check-ins, and her co-workers were mostly college students who worked part-time during the day. She would arrive after they left, work in blissful solitude, and leave before the morning rush began. It wasn't the teaching career she had once imagined, but it paid the bills and kept her safely hidden from the world. The grocery store at midnight became her second home. Walmart stayed open 24 hours, and the late-night crowd was different from the daytime shoppers. There were other night shift workers grabbing dinner before work, college students buying snacks for late-night study, sessions, and elderly people who couldn't sleep. Nobody seemed to have time or energy to stare at anyone else. Lily had mapped out the most efficient route through every aisle, produce first, then dairy, frozen foods last, so nothing would melt during her careful navigation around other shoppers. She kept her head down, earbuds in, moving through the store like she was following a GPS route designed to minimize human contact. That Tuesday night started like any other. She was reaching for a box of cereal on the top shelf when her fingers barely grazed the corner. She stood on her tiptoes, stretched as far as she could, but it was still just out of reach. 3 years of shopping here, and she had never encountered this problem before. Need some help with that? The voice came from behind her, warm and friendly, without being pushy. Lily turned around to see a tall man in navy blue scrubs, the kind nurses wore at the hospital. He looked tired, but not in a bad way, more like someone who had just finished helping people and felt good about it. Before she could mumble no thanks and walk away like she usually did, he was already reaching up to grab the cereal box. "Lucky Charms, good choice," he said with a grin, handing it to her. "My guilty pleasure, too, especially after a long shift." Lily took the box, expecting him to walk away now that the good deed was done. But he didn't. He was looking at her face, directly, not staring at her purple skin, not trying to politely look away, just making normal eye contact like she was any other person buying cereal at midnight. "Thanks," she managed to say, her voice rusty from hours of not talking to anyone. "No problem. I'm Ryan, by the way. I work nights at the hospital down the street, so I'm here pretty regularly around this time." He gestured toward his scrubs as explanation. "Emergency room nurse, which explains why I'm buying my 3rd energy drink of the week." He held up a can of Red Bull and laughed at himself. "Not exactly the healthiest habit, but it gets me through those crazy shifts." Lily found herself almost smiling. Almost. "Lily," she said quietly. "Nice to meet you, Lily. Well, I better grab the rest of my groceries before they close the pharmacy section. See you around." And just like that, he was gone, pushing his cart toward the medicine aisle like their conversation had been the most normal thing in the world. Lily stood there holding her Lucky Charms, feeling confused and slightly off balance. When was the last time someone had introduced themselves to her? When was the last time anyone had treated her like a regular person worth talking to? 2 weeks later, she saw him again in the frozen food section. He waved when he spotted her, like they were old friends meeting up for their weekly grocery run. "Hey, Lily, how's your week going?" She was so surprised he remembered her name that she actually answered honestly. "Oh, same as always. Work, sleep, repeat." "Night shift life," Ryan nodded knowingly. "I get it. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a completely different world from everyone else. Everyone's having dinner when I'm eating breakfast. Everyone's starting their day when I'm going to bed." They ended up walking through several aisles together, talking about the weird schedule of night shift work, the best places to get coffee at 3 in the morning, and how strange it felt to see sunrise every day from the inside of a building. Ryan talked easily, sharing funny stories from the emergency room without breaking patient confidentiality, asking her questions about her work that showed he was actually listening to her answers. For 23 minutes, Lily forgot to worry about whether people were staring at her skin. She forgot to keep her head down and avoid eye contact. She was just talking to someone who seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. "I should probably get going," she said finally, realizing she had been standing in the cereal aisle far longer than necessary. "Yeah, me too. Early morning, which is basically evening for people like us," Ryan said. "It was really nice talking with you, Lily. I hope I run into you again soon." Walking to her car, Lily felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Lightness. Like she was carrying less weight than when she had entered the store. She caught herself humming while she loaded groceries into her trunk, something she used to do all the time, but had stopped without realizing it. The 3rd time they met, Ryan was dealing with his own minor crisis. His cart had a broken wheel that kept veering to the left, and he was trying to navigate around a display of soup cans without knocking anything over. "Need some help with that?" Lily asked, using his own words from their first meeting. Ryan looked up and grinned. "My hero. This thing has a mind of its own." They managed to switch his groceries to a working cart, laughing as they tried to control the broken one long enough to empty it. It was such a small thing, helping someone with a shopping cart. But Lily realized it was the first time in 3 years she had offered to help a stranger instead of trying to avoid them. "You're a lifesaver," Ryan said, loading the last items into his new cart. "I was starting to think I'd have to abandon ship and shop somewhere else." "Happy to help," Lily said, and meant it. As they parted ways that night, Lily found herself looking forward to her next grocery run in a way she never had before. For the first time since her diagnosis, she was hoping to run into someone rather than hoping to avoid everyone. It was a small change, barely noticeable to anyone watching. But for Lily, it felt like the first crack in a wall she had spent years building around herself. The rain started just as Lily finished loading her groceries into the cart. What had been a clear Tuesday evening suddenly turned into one of those surprise storms that seemed to come from nowhere. By the time she reached the store's exit, water was coming down in sheets, turning the parking lot into a series of small lakes. She stood under the store's covered entrance, watching other shoppers run to their cars with newspapers held over, their heads or jackets pulled up like makeshift umbrellas. Her own umbrella was somewhere in her car, which suddenly seemed miles away instead of just across the parking lot. "Looks like we're stuck for a while," came a familiar voice behind her. Lily turned to see Ryan pushing his own cart up beside hers, shaking raindrops from his hair. He had clearly tried to make a run for it and given up halfway through. "I thought I could make it," he said, laughing at himself. "Turns out I'm not as waterproof as I thought." They stood there together, watching the storm rage in the parking lot. Other shoppers gathered under the same overhang, everyone waiting for a break in the weather. But for the first time in years, Lily didn't mind being trapped somewhere with other people. Having Ryan there made it feel less like being stuck and more like sharing an adventure. "At least we picked a good night for ice cream," Ryan said, looking at his groceries. "Though I'm starting to think it might melt before we get to our cars." Lily found herself actually laughing. "I was thinking the same thing about my frozen vegetables." They talked about everything and nothing while they waited. Ryan told her about the weirdest emergency room cases he had seen that week, always being careful not to share personal details about patients. Lily surprised herself by sharing stories from her data entry job, funny typos she had found in medical records that had made her smile during long nights alone. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Other shoppers came and went, some brave enough to make a dash for their cars, others calling friends for rides. But Ryan and Lily stayed put, talking easily like they had known each other for years instead of weeks. It was during a lull in their conversation, when they were both just watching the rain, that disaster struck. A gust of wind caught someone's abandoned shopping cart in the parking lot, sending it rolling directly toward a red sedan. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was Lily's umbrella, which she had forgotten was clipped to the side of her purse. The wind grabbed it, opened it inside out, and sent it tumbling across the wet pavement like a broken bird. Without thinking, Lily stepped out, into the rain to chase after it. "Lily, wait!" Ryan called after her, but she was already running. The umbrella seemed determined to escape, flipping and rolling away from her every time she got close. By the time she finally caught it, she was soaked through to the skin, standing in the middle of the parking lot in her thin sweater and jeans, hair plastered to her head. That's when she realized what had happened. The rain had washed away her carefully applied makeup. All of it. The foundation she spent an hour applying each morning, the concealer that helped blur the edges of her purple skin, The powder that was supposed to make everything look natural. It was all gone, running down her face in beige streams. She stood there holding her broken umbrella, feeling more exposed than she had ever felt in her life. Every inch of her purple skin was visible, from her face to her hands, to the parts of her arms where her wet sweater clung to her body. She looked like exactly what she was, someone with a rare condition that made her skin an unusual color. Ryan appeared beside her, also soaked from running into the storm after her. He took her arm gently, guiding her back toward the store entrance. But as they walked, Lily kept waiting for the moment when he would see her clearly. Really see her without the makeup, and realize what he had been talking to all these weeks. They reached the overhang, both dripping and breathing hard from there, sprint through the rain. Lily kept her head down, hair falling in front of her face like a curtain. She wanted to run to her car, to disappear, to go home and rebuild all the walls that had somehow gotten knocked down during their conversations. But Ryan was looking at her, really looking, and she could feel his eyes on her even though she refused to meet them. "Lily," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her glance up despite herself. His expression wasn't what she had expected. There was no shock, no awkward attempt to look away, no pity or uncomfortable silence. Instead, he was looking at her with something that took her breath away. "Wonder. You know," he said, his voice gentle but completely sincere. "You have the most beautiful and unique coloring I've ever seen. It's like you're a living piece of art." Lily's breath caught in her throat. In all the years since her diagnosis, no one had ever used the word beautiful in connection with her appearance. She stared at him, waiting for the joke, for the moment, when he would take it back or explain that he meant something else. But Ryan's expression remained steady and genuine. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of wet hair away from her face, his touch so natural and kind that it made her eyes fill with tears. "I hope that doesn't sound strange," he continued. "I just think you're genuinely beautiful, and I hope you know that about yourself." The words hit her like lightning. Beautiful. He had called her beautiful, not inspiring, not brave, not overcoming anything. Just beautiful, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. For a moment, Lily couldn't speak. She felt something, shifting inside her chest, like a door that had been locked for years was finally creaking open. She looked at Ryan's face, searching for any sign that he was just being kind or didn't really mean it. But all she saw was honest appreciation, the same expression someone might have looking at a sunset or a piece of art in a museum. She started, then stopped. "How do you respond when someone sees beauty where you've only seen problems? Do you accept a compliment that challenges everything you've believed about yourself?" The rain was still falling around them, but neither of them seemed to notice any more. They stood there looking at each other, one person offering a gift of perspective, the other trying to figure out if she was brave enough to accept it. "Thank you," Lily finally whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of rain on the roof above them. Ryan smiled, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes and makes you want to smile back. "Thank you for letting me see you." In that moment, standing soaked and makeup-free in a grocery store parking lot, Lily began to understand that maybe, just maybe, the person she had been hiding all these years was someone worth seeing after all. The drive home from the grocery store that night felt different than any drive Lily had taken in years. She kept glancing at herself in the rearview mirror, not with her usual quick checks to make sure she was still hidden, but with genuine curiosity. Without makeup, with her hair still damp from the rain, she could see her face clearly for the first time in a long time. The purple patches across her cheeks and forehead looked darker in the dim light of her car, but somehow less frightening. Ryan's words kept echoing in her mind. Beautiful, living piece of art. He had said it like he meant it, like he was simply stating a fact about the color of the sky or the taste of coffee. At home, Lily did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She went to her bathroom mirror and turned on all the lights. No dim lighting, no strategic angles, no makeup to hide behind. Just her, looking at herself directly under the harsh fluorescent bulbs that revealed every detail. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized. Not because of the purple skin, which she saw every day despite her best efforts to avoid mirrors, but because of something in her eyes. There was a spark there, a tiny flame of possibility that she thought had died years ago. Over the following weeks, Lily found herself changing in small ways that felt enormous to her. She started leaving the house 10 minutes earlier than necessary, not to avoid people, but because she had stopped rushing through every public space like she was trying to escape. She made eye contact with the cashier at the coffee shop near her work. She said good morning to the security guard in her office building. Ryan had become a regular part of her Tuesday night grocery runs. Their friendship was growing naturally, built on shared stories about their upside-down schedules and long conversations about books they had both read during their quiet work shifts. He treated her exactly the same as he had before the rain incident, which somehow made his compliment feel even more genuine. One evening, as they walked through the produce section together, Ryan mentioned something that stopped Lily in her tracks. No, I've been thinking about our conversation last week, he said, examining apples with the serious concentration of someone who took his fruit selection seriously. You mentioned you used to want to be a teacher. Lily's stomach clenched. She had shared that dream during one of their longer talks, when the late hour and easy conversation had made her more open than usual. Yeah, back in high school, before everything changed. What changed? Ryan asked, looking at her directly. You're still the same person who wanted to teach, right? You still love helping people learn things? The question was so simple and so complicated at the same time. Was she still the same person? Sometimes it felt like that girl had disappeared completely, replaced by someone whose main skill was becoming invisible. I don't know, Lily said honestly. I think that person got lost somewhere along the way. Ryan set down the apple he had been examining and turned to face her completely. Can I tell you something I've learned working in the emergency room? Lily nodded, curious where this was going. I see people on the worst days of their lives, right? Accidents, injuries, medical emergencies. And you know what I've noticed? The people who inspire me most, the ones who make me remember why I love being a nurse, are never the ones who look like magazine covers. He paused, clearly thinking about how to explain what he meant. There's this little girl who comes in regularly for treatments. She has a birthmark that covers half her face, this deep red mark that makes people stare. But she's the bravest person I know. She tells jokes to make other scared kids laugh. She remembers the names of all the nurses. She draws pictures for patients who have to stay overnight. Lily felt her throat getting tight with emotion. Last month, she told me she wants to be a doctor when she grows up, not despite her birthmark, not to prove anything to anyone, but because she's genuinely called to help people. And I realized something. The best teachers, the best doctors, the best helpers of any kind, they're usually people who understand what it feels like to be different. They have empathy that comes from real experience. Ryan picked up his apple again, but kept talking. You've got something that classroom full of kids would be lucky to have. You understand what it feels like to be on the outside, to feel different, to think you don't fit in. Those are exactly the kids who need a teacher who gets it. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ryan's words, about the little girl with the birthmark who wanted to be a doctor, about all the students who might benefit from having a teacher who understood what it felt like to be different. For the first time in years, she found herself looking up education programs online. Not the computer programming courses she had settled for, but actual teaching degrees. Elementary education, special education, programs designed for people who wanted to work with children who needed extra support and understanding. The application deadlines had passed for most programs, but there were continuing education courses, she could take to start building credits. Night classes, perfect for someone with her schedule. The more she read, the more excited she became. And excitement was an emotion she had almost forgotten how to feel. 3 months later, Lily walked into her first education class, wearing a light sweater and jeans, her purple skin visible on her, hands and the parts of her face that had never been completely covered even with makeup. Her heart was beating fast, but not with the panicked rhythm of someone trying to hide. This was the nervousness of someone doing something important and scary and wonderful. The professor, Dr. Martinez, was talking about the qualities that make great teachers. Empathy, she was saying, is perhaps the most important trait an educator can have. The ability to understand and share the feelings of your students, especially those who may feel different or struggle to fit in. Lily found herself nodding along, taking notes not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember every word. After class, a woman about her age approached her. "Hi, I'm Katie. I couldn't help noticing you taking such detailed notes. Are you as excited about this program as I am?" For a split second, Lily felt the old instinct to keep her head down, to give a short answer and walk away quickly. But then, she remembered Ryan's words, the spark she had seen in her mirror that rainy night, the little girl who wanted to be a doctor. "I'm Lily," she said, looking Katie in the eye and smiling genuinely. "And yes, I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." A year and a half later, Lily stood in front of her first classroom as a student teacher, looking at 23 pairs of curious eyes. Some of the children stared at her purple skin for a moment, the way children do when they encounter something unfamiliar. But instead of feeling ashamed, Lily felt ready. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice strong and clear. "My name is Miss Lily, and I'm going to be your teacher for the next few months. I'm really excited to learn with all of you." One small hand shot up immediately. "Miss Lily, why is your skin purple?" The question she had feared for so many years no longer felt like an attack. It felt like an opportunity. "That's a great question, Alex. I have a condition that makes my skin this color. It makes me different from most people, and you know what I've learned? Being different isn't something to hide from. It's something that helps me understand other people who feel different, too." She looked around the classroom, seeing not just curious faces, but future doctors, teachers, artists, and dreamers who might sometimes feel like they don't fit in. Now, who can tell me what makes them special and different? Hands shot up all around the room, and Lily smiled, knowing she was exactly where she belonged.